What's up, it's Tom. Thanks for clicking on this video. We're going through my updated top 50 Twins prospects, not only just adding in these guys that the Twins acquired via trade at the deadline, but also the draftees. So just a mountain of new names adding to my list. I'll show you the top 5 here as a intro the video so you can digest that. But a couple things I want to throw out before we get started. Number one, I want to urge everybody to not really put any baggage on these guys that were acquired via trades. Let's not look at them as like, oh, he was acquired for this player, so I'm going to expect him to do this, because that's just not how it works. And it's not really fair to that player. You can take that line of thinking and aim that at the front office. Sure, absolutely. But let's let these guys be their own guys. Look at them as their own players. Also, I want to say I'm going to have some positive stuff about these guys. I'm pretty excited about a lot of these guys, but that doesn't mean that I necessarily like the trades. Those are two different things. Just because I really like a prospect doesn't mean I think he was worth the major leaguer that he was traded for. Keep that in mind. So even though probably a lot of positivity coming from me on some of these names, again, that doesn't mean I'm excited about what the Twins did at the trade deadline. Keep in mind that I am still extremely unfamiliar with these players, to be fair. I did work hard this weekend to get eyes on guys, and I'm going to show you some highlights of these new guys as we go through the list. So show you some video that I picked up along the way. But remember, I think my strength in doing these lists is that I watch these guys play a lot. So if, let's say, Mick Able was a Twins prospect, this would be year 5 of me watching Mick Able. I'd have my head wrapped around who this guy is, what he can do, what he can't do pretty well, instead of having 5 days. I was somewhat familiar with him before, but it's kind of a different animal and trying to do this. So keep all that in mind. Last thing I want to call out is these lines that you're seeing. So what do those lines represent? Those represent tiers. So basically what I'm saying is, in my opinion, Walker Jenkins is in his own tier. He's not only my number 1 prospect, there's really nobody else I even consider putting above Walker Jenkins. He's number 1. Talked about him plenty over the years, so let's move on from him. Should call out that age is baseball age, so their age season, maybe not their current age. Kalen Culpepper is my number 2 Twins prospect now. That's a big change on a guy that's been in the system. So before we even get into these new names, we've got a new number 2 prospect on my list. I've just been continually impressed with him. He keeps showing that he is better than people thought he was. And he's getting better, and he's hitting at AA right now. He's not been up there for long. He's always looked better at shortstop than I think anybody thought he would be, or anybody reported him to be at the draft. I think this is a tremendous find for the Twins. I'm super impressed. So Kalen Culpepper moves up to the number 2 prospect for me. But again, Kalen Culpepper, Emmanuel Rodriguez, Luke Keyshaw, and Eduardo Tait all in the same tier. So what I'm saying there is basically if you want to come at me and say you've got Tait 2, Keyshaw 3, Rodriguez 4, Culpepper 5, literally the inverse of what I have, I'm not going to be like, oh, you're crazy. So that's kind of my point in talking about these tiers, so you understand, just because I have one guy 4 spots ahead of another guy doesn't mean I think necessarily of them all that differently. And that's, I think, the context that these tiers sort of help with. So, again, there's the top 5. Eduardo Tait, talked about him some on the video that he did on Duran. He is sort of my prospect kryptonite in a couple ways, so I feel like I have to be a little bit careful about getting too far ahead of myself. I considered him higher than 5, just to throw that out there, but I feel like a couple that he's sort of a player type I've been burned by in the past. We'll put it that way. Young guys who perform at a level that they're young for, and then also young guys who hit for power. I can get excited about those guys and then really get burnt by them. I don't want to name names, but so if you want to tell me I'm high on Eduardo Tait, maybe I am. It's entirely possible. But moving on, showing through the top 11. Why 11? Because that's the next tier. That's where the next tier goes through. Marek Houston, I'm excited about him, and maybe a little bit more than a lot of other places. I'm not necessarily wild about his hitting potential either, but man, a guy that can play shortstop, that's part of why Kalen Culpepper's number 2 on my list too. I really put a lot of emphasis on guys that can play well at a premium defensive position, catcher, shortstop, center field. You're always going to need two of those guys on your roster. You always need two catchers. You always need two guys capable of playing shortstop. You always need two guys capable of playing center field. There are so much more big league opportunities likely for those players. He's going to have to hit some. I think he can do it. I don't think that's going to be carrying at all. I think his defense is going to carry him. But I think that was a good pickup. I like Marek Houston. I'm interested to see where he goes from here. The next two, I might be just in love with these guys. I might just be clinging on to these guys, Charlie Soto and Dason Hill. And it might be a thing kind of where I was referencing with Tait in that, I'm playing that game of like, well, if they're able to do this stuff at 19, like just think about when they're 22 or 23 or 24, like some of those other guys. And again, sometimes that's not how it works, but I can just see a path for both of those guys to be potentially top of the rotation type starters. And there's not that many guys that you can say that about. They would be higher up on my list if they were maybe older or higher up in the minors, where I could feel more confident of that. That's why they're not higher up. You'd say, well, hey, if you think they can be top of the rotation starters, why aren't they higher? That's why. But I feel like I have both of them pretty high on my list compared to some other ones I see. Dason Hill is worrying me a little bit because he's had trouble throwing strikes of late. But he is also only 19 years old, and his stuff is great. His feel for pitching is really good. When it's on, it's very impressive. But yeah, he's a tall kid. He's still growing into his body, really. So maybe there's some mechanical stuff there where that's just going to kind of iron itself out. Obviously, Soto hasn't pitched much this year, but I remain very high on Charlie Soto. Another weird one that stands out probably is that I have Kendry Rojas above Mick Able, and again, they're all in the same tier. They're back to back. It's not like it's like a huge slam dunk to me, but a lot of what I'm looking at in pitching is how likely do I think you might be a top of the rotation starter, and how likely do I think you're probably more of a back of the rotation starter, and how likely do I think you might slide into the bullpen. Mick Able, I know he threw a gem. He threw a gem today for St. Paul, and he has tremendous AAA numbers, but I'll be honest, I might be seeing the glass, half full on Kendry Rojas and the glass half empty on Mick Able. This is something that I myself actually look at prospect lists and sometimes can be like, well, come on. Because sometimes the guy who has the fewer questions because he hasn't been tested can get elevated, and that I could be doing that with Soto, Hill, and Rojas. And then the guy who's maybe faced more adversity and we know better, more of a known entity, kind of gets slid back. Again, that's something that I see, and when I see it, it bothers me. I might be doing this here. I will admit to you that I might be seeing the glass half empty on Mick Able. I don't know what he has other than a fastball. And in the major leagues, it's a small sample, but major league hitters have just sat on that fastball and have hit it. And he's got good velocity, especially for a starting pitcher. He's got good velocity. That's not all you need. And I know some guys can really live out. Kendry Rojas throws tons of fastballs, but Kendry Rojas' fastball moves. I really like his changeup for a left-handed pitcher. That's so important. He's got a slider that he's very comfortable throwing as well. Mick Able, he's getting fastball. It's good. His sinker can look good at times. He throws a slider and a curveball, but his curveball throw shows a lot more value right now, but I don't like either of those pitches, to be honest. And then he clearly is not very comfortable with his changeup. Now, this is Mick Able currently. Could the Twins tweak some things? Could the Twins change his slider into a different shape? Could the Twins have him try a cutter? Absolutely. But the Phillies could have done that too. So, and I don't think that's a dumb organization or anything. So that's kind of the thing that I wonder about Mick Able is if, yes, I think the Twins look at him, and I think the Twins, not to say that he's a complete project, but I think the Twins can look at him and say, oh my gosh, if we can get at him to do X, Y, Z, whoa, that's a guy we could be really excited about. And I can see that too with Mick Able, to be fair. I'm not saying I can't see that. But to me, again, it's a glass half empty. I see way more possibilities that he can't make those changes and that he ends up in the bullpen, which is maybe a good transition into Connor Prelip, who I'm probably lower on than anybody. he's getting hit a lot. Connor Prelip is getting hit a lot. We're going to really focus on the draftees and the new guys, but I just wanted to throw that out there. That Connor Prelip's at 11 is at number 1. He still hasn't convinced me that he can be a starting pitcher. He's still not throwing deep into games at all. He's not getting out of like the 4th inning, and then he's getting hit quite a bit. He's not missing a ton of bats. The stuff looks good. Shape of his pitches look good to me. It's not like he's like walking guys like crazy. So, if you're more excited, like again, he's in a tier that starts at number 6. So if somebody throws Connor Prelip at number 6 on their list, I'm not going to think they're nuts, even though I have 4 pitchers above him in mine. We're kind of splitting hairs here sometimes, but that's how I feel about Connor Prelip. All right, so moving on to my next tier of players you see there, kind of leaving off with Prelip at the top to show you where we were last. This is where a bunch of new guys come in this 12 to 22 range. Riley Quick, new draftee. Quentin Young, new draftee. Those guys slotting in. And I feel like, man, if you're second and third picks in the draft, slot in the 14-16 range, you're doing pretty good. And then some of the new guys, Alan Roden, Ryan Gallagher, and Hendry Mendez, slot in here as well. And this is kind of a thing that I want to point out about these acquisitions from the trade deadline, just taking a pause to talk big picture real quick, is that I don't know that any of them is really like a star, a top of the roster type guy. I think some of these arms could do that in the bullpen. I think they're less likely to do it in the rotation, obviously. But the amount of depth that the Twins have in their organization right now compared to pre-deadline is insane. And, well, I should say their system. Because obviously, organizationally, the big club took a giant blow from the trade deadline. But, I will give them this, that the minor league system looks way more healthy than it does than previously. Obvious, it should. But I would also add that I don't think I talked about this, but I think the system was weaker than it's been in a while, depth-wise, weaker than it's been in a while. And I think you don't talk about wins and losses when you talk about like system strength, but this is like the worst performing that all the Twins minor league affiliates have been doing wins and losses wise that I can remember. And I think part of that is due to a lack of overall depth in the minor leagues this year. So, that's not a priority. Obviously, you don't prioritize that over big league success, but it is something to consider. I do think the minor league system is much more healthy, and I don't think it was in a great spot depth-wise. I think there's a lot to like about the top of the prospect list, but I think it was kind of shallow. And now, you throw in this draft class, you throw in all these prospects that come in, things are looking dramatically different. But Alan Roden coming in from Toronto at number 18 for me. He's another guy, I think I've seen the glass half empty on Mick Able. And, maybe if I watched these guys throughout their minor league career, I'd have a rosier view on. That's me trying to be honest with myself. Because, again, Alan Roden, I think it's easier to pick apart a guy's weaknesses when he's been exposed at the major league level, like a Mick Able and an Alan Roden have been. So, to be fair to those guys, if you want to tell me I'm low on those guys, I think that could be a blind spot, definitely. Ryan Gallagher, who got beat up in his first outing in the Twins org with Wichita. I was not expecting a ton going in. He's maybe the guy, along with Kendry Rojas, who really grabbed my attention, and I think I'm interested in more than I thought I would be. The stuff isn't impressive, but this looks like a tremendous foundation to build upon. This guy really can pitch. This guy throws 4 pitches and like mixes them up pretty evenly. Like he appears confident with all 4 of his pitches. He can throw them in different spots in the zone. He can hit his spots. So a good deep arsenal, good command. He does throw like 94. I've seen starts where he's been lower, where he's been kind of 91, 92. And then I saw some starts where he was more like 93, 94. And keep in mind with Ryan Gallagher, he was drafted last year. So this was a guy drafted in the 6th round in last year's draft class, pitching in Double-A. If you look at Twins equivalents from last year's draft class, they're in Fort Myers right now. So if Ryan Gallagher gets his teeth in and kicked in Double-A, I think that's kind of almost a little bit to be expected because he's been, he's 22 years old, so I don't want to make it sound like he's some child in Double-A, but he's been aggressively pushed for a guy first pro year. Ryan Gallagher. So, and again, I see a starting pitcher there, and it's not gonna. That's why he's at 19. It's not gonna be like a top of the rotation starter. But starting pitchers are not easy to find, even back of the rotation starters, which is why the Twins were able to trade Chris Paddock for someone, which we'll get down to in a moment here. Hendry Mendez, he's really fun. He's really fun. There are some issues with his swing and how much he puts the ball on the ground, but he hits the ball hard. Definitely not going to be a center fielder, but also could be I think a slightly above average defensively corner outfielder. Like he moves around pretty well. Fun. I enjoy him. I think he's probably a guy though that's going to be a better minor league performer, and then maybe some of these flaws get exposed some more as he moves up further. Maybe he's Double-A now. It's not like we're talking about some kid in low A or something, but he's an interesting get. Got him at 21, and then CJ Culpepper rounds out this tier here. So moving on, again, we're going to keep Culpepper on there as the last guy in that tier. Adrian Bajorquez, another internal guy who's just been yo-yoing for me like crazy, because 1 minute it looks like his stuff is super legit, and then the next minute he cannot throw a strike, and then all of a sudden the next minute he's somehow got himself pointed straight again. So I think, though, the arm talent is really, really intriguing. Probably going to be a reliever once he gets up, but could be a really, really nasty reliever. Enrique Jimenez coming in here, the guy that acquired in the Chris Paddock trade that I referenced earlier. I'll say, we'll run some highlights, but I'll say if the nickname Big Dumper wasn't already taken, maybe it'd be appropriate for this guy. He has a huge trunk, huge lower body. Like, it would be super obvious if somebody would say, hey, what position do you think that guy plays? It would be really easy to guess he's a catcher. He's got off to a great start with Fort Myers, which is noteworthy because that's a new level for him as well. I'm impressed at I'll say I'm impressed at that trade. I mentioned a lot of the trades I didn't like, but he's only 25th on my list. I think some other lists have him higher, but to get that for Chris Paddock, I think that kind of shows too how few starting pitchers there were available at this deadline and how badly Detroit needed just someone that could cover innings. And they also have catching in their system as well. So there's some reasons why they were willing to part with Enrique Jimenez. But he looks like a really fun player. Handles the bat really well. Takes good plate appearances too. I like this guy. And to be talking about these guys that I'm really intrigued by at 23, 25, this is a great sign. A lot of these other guys, Kadeem Zhao is definitely of interest. To call him out in particular. Some of these other guys are kind of stalling out. Kalai Rosario, though, I will say is starting to pick back up pace. But again, kind of back on that topic of depth. When you get these guys, Ricardo Olivar, Kadeem Zhao, Kalai Rosario, Billy Amick, you see in that last month, these guys were inside my top 20, and now they're barely staying in the top 30. That's what this trade deadline and the draft class has done to this system. These are intriguing prospects to be, potentially on the end of a top 30. Some people will have these guys outside of the top 30. Some people have these guys higher, but you really kind of start to see a big difference as we move down here. Moving on to the next tier, which you get some more new acquisitions. Sam Armstrong and Garrett Horn, both of those guys. Sam Armstrong came over from the Cubs, Garrett Horn in the Texas trade for Danny Coulomb. Both of these guys have intrigue as starting pitchers as they currently are, but I think both of them look to me like they would make for good relievers. Garrett Horn, in particular, also seems to have a personality or a fire to him that might suit being he might enjoy being in the bullpen. Some guys, when you move into the bullpen, they're really bummed. They don't really like that role, and maybe it takes them some time to get accustomed to it. I bet you, even though everybody wants to be a starting pitcher, a little more glamorous, more money. That's definitely part of it. But I bet you Garrett Horn would really embrace a bullpen role, and he might be a really interesting bullpen lefty before too long himself. He was also from last year's draft in the 6th round as well, so drafted in the same round as Gallagher was. Kind of interesting there. Okay, moving on down, I do want to call out Kyler Fedko as just a guy who's broken out this year and is one of the better Twins hitters in the minor league system. It's been really fun to watch him. You see some other familiar names. Again, some of these guys right outside my top 20, and now they're clinging to the top 40. That's just a huge thing. James Ellwanger, the guy they drafted, kind of wild, probably profiles more as a bullpen guy, so that's maybe why he's so much lower on my list than the last draftees we spoke about, but certainly someone who is of intrigue. And then moving on down, these are all the same tier still. So this last tier is gigantic. But we have, again, some guys that have been ranked pretty high on my list in the past. Corey Lewis, a former Twins minor league pitcher of the year, walking everybody right now, though. So it's hard to really grasp onto his prospect status when he can't get the ball over the plate. And then some more draftees, Jason Wrights, Matt Barr, Bruin Agbayani. Did want to put Jeremy Vioria on here, even though I couldn't rank him. 16-year-old right-handed pitcher they acquired in a trade. I can't without seeing it, in the DSL. There's not really video out there a ton. There's not a ton of information about those guys. I didn't feel, especially with the depth of the system, I didn't feel comfortable sticking him in there anywhere, but did want to just say that that's another name that they acquired in the trade deadline. Seems interesting. Complete wild card. Just, a chip and a chance is what we got on Jeremy Vioria. So he's in the picture, but I don't have him on my list. And then the last thing I want to call it is the guys that dropped off just from last month. Some of the guys that were sniffing my top 30 are no longer in my top 50 as a result of all this activity. And then again, I keep saying this, but I want to make it clear that doesn't mean I love what they did at the deadline. But it's something to keep in mind if you're somebody who likes to follow the prospects, if you're somebody who likes to watch the minor league games. This is going to be fun. We'd rather have the Twins playing well or have the guys that we fell in love with on their way up through the minor league still on the Twins. But, it's not nothing. Hopefully the team gets sold soon and, all of these guys can help us usher in a new era of Twins baseball under a new ownership. That's we won't go deep into that because we're focusing on the prospects. Let me know what you think. Again, this is probably the least confident I've ever been in one of my lists, but I wanted to get this together and get this out there. Also show you some of these highlights of these guys. So I appreciate you watching, especially to the end here. We'll talk again before too long. It might not be soon. I'm pretty gassed from all this, but we'll talk again before too long.